Transcendent is what is the necessary presupposition of experience. It speaks of the nomen that way. But he said, well, Kant says we have a tendency to reify. We have a tendency to reify this transcendence. That's why he doesn't buy into any of the arguments for God, but he does say that for some practical reason we must, just as we must believe that we're free, our freedom is an eminently practical idea. So is God, an eminently practical idea. But you see, this is the problem, I think, with transcendence, that Taylor, even though one feels that he is in this Kantian Hegelian tradition of talking about the relationship between immanence and transcendence, it is a view where there is no absolute sharp distinction between immanence and transcendence. But he then does not pay sufficient attention to those atheists like Hegel, Spinoza, Camus, Nietzsche, who also live this this unity of immanence and transcendence.
Okay. Right, I don't know.
As far as religion is concerned, I am simple-minded, and I have no sense for the complexities of the religious faith. But sometimes, as I read the text of the group of people you have called new theologians, sometimes I'm enthusiastic about the text, but nevertheless I have to ask the question, what is that for religion without God? What is that the religion without the hell, without the devil, without the sin, without the damnation, without the salvation? I think most.
Well, yeah, I don't have those kinds of questions because I am drawn to seeing Christian faith as Taylor does, in terms of weakening the distinction between experience of self and experiencing the other, and weakening the distinction between language and reality. Which is to say that the religious person has a language, a whole, if you want, a whole context in which God makes sense. But I think that maybe I'm wrong. But these new Christians have really no sympathy for hell, fire, and all that damnation and all that kind of scary stuff. They want to leave that behind for the Inquisitions, and they're quite clear that they condemn that. But that's part of Christendom. That's the scourge of Christendom, is to have created these awful monsters. About evil, Zizek has Zizek is a funny, very interesting guy. Zizek says evil is not breaking the law, but the refusal to break the law. Which, again, you could relate it to Illich a little bit. Evil is really to be caught joyfully within the code. Yes.
It's very hard to understand. This quote is also very hard to follow. But unless you have, I have one more question. The old atheists, in a way, with that Nietzschean view of facing an infinite universe and Übermensch perhaps able to delude us for a while, or be able to to face and win the partial battles, if not the war,
Yes.
then these new atheists do not even dare to talk about the program, because that was basically a program, almost an ideology, if you want. Well, why not? A good, solid, old-fashioned atheist ideology of facing infinity. What is the ideology? What's the program of the new atheists, if any?
Regarding this?
Well, no.
Well, you see, when I first read Taylor, and especially when I read him on Camus, I was very uneasy because he says, well, yes, this is very honorable, very admirable, but he fails to account for the aura that is required for his project of piecemeal victories, of getting together. And I didn't understand what's this aura that Taylor is talking about. But as I read the discussion of Tillich, Ivan Tillich, I think that this aura means for him agape, means that absolute love. And I mean, the belief is that somehow these small victories, if they're not sort of trivializing human striving, and these collaborations with others in making these small victories could very easily be reduced to crass pragmatic projects. In other words, he wants to say that there is something bigger than these small victories. There's something bigger than this community. And I also want to say for the new atheists, and maybe you're shocked, is that the new theologians are just as resistant to a global narrative as would a Nietzsche Foucault be. In other words, I think a new theist must also resist global narratives, because global narratives will involve a kind of codification that the whole point is to get beyond, to get out of. I mean, that's the... Sorry, Sam, question.
But I was asking about the new atheists, Dennett, Dawkins, the Hitchens. I didn't ask about Taylor. And
so what about the new atheists? Sorry, then I completely misunderstood your question.
Yes. But that was a good answer, but not for my answer. The old atheists, infinite void, facing and so on, so it's futile. That's right. What do these new atheists have for us?
The new atheists wallow in the actual world. I mean, Taylor would say they're self-satisfied smugs. They're self-satisfied that their knowledge, their scientific knowledge, is all that they need spiritually. And I think that we don't even have to go to theists. The criticism of the new atheists doesn't really have to be, and Taylor recognized, doesn't even have to come from a Christian point of view. I make the same objection, and I have the same contempt, if you wish, for their position as Christians would have. And Nietzsche, I brought some reading. Gee whiz, I almost forgot. Let me read you.
You have to fight with the portion of wine we'll have in a few minutes. So
here is Monsieur Nietzsche. Monsieur Nietzsche. No, people should not come at me with science when I'm looking for a natural antagonist to the aesthetic ideal. When I ask where is the opposing will, he's been talking, this is from the Genealogy of Morals, and it's the end of it. He's been criticizing what he calls the aesthetic ideal, the aesthetic priest, the priesthood, Christendom, okay? And he says, well, he raises the question, well, could science then be the worthy, the honorable enemy of the aesthetic ideal? And he says, no. When I ask where is the opposing will, in which an opposing ideal expresses itself, for that purpose science does not stand sufficiently on its own, not nearly, for that it first requires a value ideal, a power to make value in whose service it could have faith in itself. Science is never in itself something which creates values. Its relationship to the aesthetic ideal is still not inherently antagonistic at all. It's even more the case that for the most part it represents the forward driving force in the inner development of the aesthetic ideal. Its resistance and struggle, when we inspect more closely, are not concerned with, in any way with the ideal itself, but only with its external trappings. Clothing, masquerade, its temporary hardening, petrification. In that very, anyways, you get the idea. I mean, Nietzsche is just as contemptuous of scientism, and I think we should hold that distinction. There is science, and we respect, all of us respect science, but we condemn scientism, which is making a fetish of science, which is making science into something sacred, which is making science into something absolute, which is making science into something. And that's where I think when Taylor talks about closure, he talks about the closure of the immanent frame, its closure to transcendence. I think he has these guys in mind who are have a basically naturalistic, mechanistic, positivistic view of the universe. And it's as much an idol as any religious idol has ever been. You see, I think that's the thing.
Any last questions here?
So tell me, how many of you here are not atheists? I want to have one. You're not an atheist.
Wow.
Good.
Okay, well, the dessert celebration. Well, Béla, thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
I'm sure you, but I was very, very glad that how this lecture, it was great.
Me too. I'm very glad that I'm still standing.
Well, not for long, because in the Spitze room in next building there is a very good wine, Slovak wine, ready for us, some cheese and some nuts, and let's continue to discuss these things off record if that's what is necessary. Okay, Béla, thank you very much.
Thank you.